This podcast is brought to you by Amusement Warehouse Magazine, the industry's largest trade publication. We cover amusement parks, carnivals, fairs, festivals, history, safety columns. We really got it all when it comes to the amusement business. Only remaining print publication in the amusement industry on a regular basis. So if you're interested in what the amusement industry has to offer, subscribe today. You can subscribe by logging on to amusementwarehouse.com, carnivalwarehouse.com, or amusementparkwarehouse.com. Welcome to another edition of the Amusement Warehouse Podcast. Today, from way out in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, we have Mr. Darren Torr, CEO of Rocky Mountain Coasters. It's waving. I can see him from there, Virginia. Welcome, Darren. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your company's vision with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Hopefully everybody's having
My
a great
pleasure.
summer and enjoying the all the great rides that we put out there.
You do have some really neat pieces out there. I've ridden one of them here in Virginia, the King's Dominion one time.
Oh, yeah.
Twisted Timbers, right? Is that the name of it? I think so.
Yeah, what'd you think of it?
I thought it was awesome. It was actually, and that's like one of those, like a little bit of steel and a little bit of wood too, right? With both.
Yeah, if your audience is not real familiar with it, what we're really like this, the RMC, we've really built on this is based on fan ratings, maybe 13 of the top 30 coasters out there in the world, or 11, something like that, depending on the different ratings of it. But what makes it unique is everybody else builds coasters out of steel pipe when they kind of bend it. And our track really mimics traditional wood track, but it's steel track that we cut out flat and then flex into place. So because it's flexed into place, it's not mechanically, bent into place, because that creates little micro kinks in it. Our track is flexed into shape, which really gives us the smoothest rides in the world. And it's a patented process, and we're, pretty happy with it. So
Pretty neat. So you've been the CEO since like right before the pandemic, right? You took the position?
Yeah, I was in about 2020.
Or right after, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, 2020, the guy that founded RMC, Rocky Mountain Construction, his name was Fred Grubb. And he was kind of ready, looking to retire and looking to go in a different direction. So I was living in the area, and I'd worked with a company that kind of got split up and sold, and I moved 9 times, didn't want to move again. And I really, I've always loved the industry. I've rode coasters, and many times when I was a kid, like everybody else, has nothing but fond memories. And when I started meeting with Fred, looking at businesses in the area, it really had some really strong things. I mean, they had they said they had the best rides in the world, but when I was like, everybody says that when you're trying to sell a company. But when I really dug into it, I really saw that was the truth. Really, great followers, enthusiasts out there in the ACE community, and then really a great staff too. And I thought I could help, because I think the company has always been innovative, but bring a little bit more kind of just bigger company manufacturing operations, that kind of stuff experience. So I think it was a good compliment to really take this innovative, great company that we've got, but really kind of help it maybe just, add a little bit more, some of the basics, scheduling, some of the engineering things that you get from, a more traditional company from that standpoint.
Exactly. You've had quite an extensive background. I was reading a little bit about you, including an MBA. So
don't hold that against
the amusement industry always. Sorry.
Don't hold that against me.
No, I got one too, actually. So do the same thing. What interested you in the amusement industry, though? Was that an odd thing to be in, or were you just had a childhood? I think you said you built coasters when you were a kid.
No, I mean, who doesn't like it? But when I was looking for things to get into, this particular, if you want to go into the MBA route from that standpoint, I mean, I think it's a differentiated product. We have our tracks of them that was patented. It's really this great following. It's not a really there's not that many people in the market. When you go to when you get the whole ride stuff, it's a bigger portfolio. At that time, we only had coasters, but there's 8 or 10 companies in the world that make coasters, so kind of a limited number of
Is that all it is? 8 or 10?
Yeah, and think of the barriers to the entry. Who's going to buy your first coaster from if you want to get into the market? Super hard to get into from that standpoint.
Look what I built in my backyard.
Yeah, who wants to buy serial number 001? And, credit to Fred working with Six Flags and originally partnering to do all that kind of stuff. It was kind of incremental, but really, really hard to get into. And I knew, we just had really, really great people. And, to me, it looked like there was really just an opportunity to build upon the great foundation we had in place and do be a little more purposeful, maybe, go a little bit more international and then, kind of route out the product portfolio. I think what's happening, if you look at it like any other business, I think you're seeing, it's like the car industry. There's like they become more and more international from that standpoint. You really can't just be an Italian car company. You've got to be able to serve Europe and then the United States and the West and those other things if you're going to compete. And I think the same thing is sort of shaken out in the in the ride industry. And we're really trying to build the absolute best rides in the world. But I think for us to we're really trying to also be a little bit more globally focused, from that standpoint too, if that makes sense. Pretty proud. Yeah. I'd say was point I'm proud of is we design, manufacture, and install most of our rides, and just about everything is done here in the United States. Either Texas or Idaho.
What's the history of RMC? How did it get started, and what drove them to be the company they are
Fred
today?
Grubb, who founded the company in 2001, and he kind of partnered with a guy named Alan Schilke, and they had an idea of Fred was constantly rebuilding wood track and roller coasters, because you think about the wood track, they didn't really build the coasters, don't steer much, they're banging around back and forth, and it's constantly tearing up the track, and that's why they're so rough. So he just thought there had to be a better way to be able to do it. So we partnered with Alan Schilke, and they came up with a steel track system, which I mentioned earlier, which is basically it mimics traditional wooden track, but it's made out of steel welded track construction. And they built that, and they were able to partner with Six Flags. Their head engineer at the time, Larry Chicola, maybe wasn't head engineer, but one of their leading engineers at the time, partnered with them to really prove out the concept and put it in place. And then really started off as sort of a value play. You've got these traditional wooden coasters that it cost them a ton to replace track all the time, and there was no inversions with it whatsoever. So once we went to the steel track, it allowed us to really just dramatically smooth out those rides, but also make them much more extreme with inversions, and really allowed us to focus on airtime. And at the time, Alan Schilke is really one of the leading designers. He came out from Aero lineage.
Yeah, I was going to ask that, but I didn't want to be wrong, but I thought he's an Aero.
Yeah, he came out of Aero, and so he really had this long history of really designing these great rides. So the design philosophy was there with the low center of gravity, lots of airtime, really like how to build a great layout. And then when you paired that together with probably the best product in the industry, it really was a kind of a home run from that standpoint.
That's pretty neat. And then what was your first coaster that you built from the ground up? I mean, you did refurb, I guess. And then the first coaster you built on your own, how did that come about?
I have to look at the Wikipedia site. I'm not sure exactly which one it would qualify as first. But we've probably
it's first. Okay.
Around 30 right now, we've got out there. So I can tell you what we've done the last 5 years.
Well, what have you done the last 5 years?
Well, we've opened up, Iron Gwazi, which I think is one of the top roller coasters in the world, top 3, 4, usually from the, the coaster enthusiasts when they're ranking them. Opened up a killer ride at Hershey Park, Wildcat, which was both those were, we call them reimagines, where we took an existing wooden coaster, chopped off the top, made it taller, longer, much more extreme from that standpoint. We've opened up rides in Korea, our first ride in Korea, which is our single rail Raptor train. And then we've also, opened up a couple of other rides, and we just opened up Dueling Coaster was in Holland. And we've got another ride that's going to open up in Iowa here in another couple of months. And along the way, just over 2 years ago, maybe more, more in line with your audience, we merged with Larson International down in Texas. So, Jeff was good friends with Fred Grubb, who founded our company, and happened to live in the area up here and kind of pop in. We became friends, and Jeff was looking for an opportunity to, step back from the business and retire. And, very, very complimentary organizations. A lot of the, they would, obviously there's more focus from Larson on the portable industry, carnivals, but they also had some amusement rides. And we had a great portfolio of these big coasters, but we didn't have anything to really round out the portfolio, in a smaller size, and so now, we go from, spin rides to our loops to our drop towers to, all the things in the larger portfolio. It just gives us, from a manufacturing standpoint, product development, engineering, working with customers, a more complete portfolio. And we've really tried to take the innovative spirit from, RMC, what we've applied from the coasters, of really just doing groundbreaking stuff, and take that back to the Larson portfolio of rides, that we picked up to really, how do we modernize them? How do we look at the mechanical systems? How do we, improve the lighting? How do we improve safety? Just really going back to basics on those. And then also, how do we innovate with them? How do we add, new features? What can we do with those that, that's really going to be something differentiated, unique, and really make it, just not an okay ride, but a great ride. I think you've always got to be, striving to make things better. Every single time we build a ride, we really lean into like, what can we do to make this better?
That's cool. You jumped in the Larson part before I thought you were, but one of the big pieces in the Larson portfolio is Selner, which he bought, and includes a Tilt-A-Whirl, which is one of the most iconic rides in parks and carnivals and everywhere, really everywhere. Are there any plans for the Tilt-A-Whirl? Have you built one in a while, or is there?
Yeah. So it turns, coincidentally, it's a good question. It turns 100 years old next year. It was founded in 1926. And if you actually go through the Roller Coaster Museum Hall of Fame, which is next to our factory down in Texas, there's the original patent model, and it was pretty cool when you look at it. So we're in the process of refreshing all of Tilt-A-Whirl right now with, new screens, vehicles, a bunch of, aesthetic things, new paint jobs, new light, a bunch of different things to really freshen it up and, I'll say, modernize it, but still really keep that, because it is such a vintage ride. Who hasn't been on one? Who doesn't have a great memory of it? But it doesn't mean it can't really have, up-to-date control systems, just modernize it, from that standpoint. So we're not going to mess it up, but we also are trying to make sure modernize it, make sure it's just, as good a ride as it possibly can be.
Yeah, that's a big anniversary. Eli Bridge just had their 100th this year, or is it 125 or something like that? Some astronomical number. We interviewed Patty Sullivan about her anniversary, but Tilt-A-Whirl's like, besides the Eli wheel, the Tilt-A-Whirl's the other just long-standing, unbelievable, iconic piece in the amusement industry for sure. So I was curious what was going on with it, because I haven't heard much on the Selner side or the Selner things going on. And I was curious what your plans were.
We sold about 1,000. We sold a few of them. We're in the process of actually working on kind of, really kind of a relaunch for next year for 2026 that hopefully will be kind of exciting for the industry.
Even a lot of parks, have tilts and still or purchased them and were doing what they were doing. And what about the spin rides, Bear Fair and Merry-Go-Round and things like that? Those were great sellers too for Selner.
Yeah, we really have got serious about that business from, it's kind of an economics thing when you get into those rides. I think we've always had good rides, but we really hadn't invested in kind of keeping them. I think it was
not as sexy as the big coaster, but you could sell a lot of those little guys that they do really well.
We're taking all of those products just to, if you're from a business standpoint, if you're interested in it, we're really taking those products international. So we're getting those products so they've got TUV, so we can sell them internationally. They're a little bit more harder because there's more competition from that standpoint. But some of that stuff is pretty unique. We think we can go after it. Worked with our team to really work on, quality and also operational productivity, so we can really be price competitive. We want to make stuff in the United States. Some of those rides, there are some other competitors for it, which means we've got to be very efficient and organized to be able to do that. We've really focused on that. One of our spin rides, our jumping jumbos, we really worked hard to figure out what the market price was out there, because there's a competitor out of Europe, but they've got a 2-year lead time, and so it's kind of hard to. And they've got some extra shipping costs, but we're like, well, that's where the market is. Either we're going to make a great ride at this, and that's with new control systems, new paint, new seats, new fiberglass. But we're really working on that stuff but we got to be at this right price point for it. So we know what that is, and we frankly just lowered our price on them by $100,000 on our jumping jumbos from that stuff.
Wow.
I think we went from not exactly mid 400s down to like 340,000. So I think
that's a pretty reasonable ride, actually.
Yeah, very competitive there. And our flying scooters are really pretty reasonably priced too, in that. So I think we've got a lot of rides that I think that are a great value that, that I'm proud to sell, put out there that are, look good, safe, easy to install. We go all the way from, smaller rides all the way up to, giant roller coasters, because it's kind of, from trying to run a manufacturing business, it's lumpy. You get these big giant rides in there and you can't really control it or order them, and they get pushed out a year or two and that kind of stuff. So it's nice to have a parts business, which makes up part of our stuff. We're really doing a lot of repair rides on rides right now too. And then, have new rides from that standpoint. The repair stuff is really, we found a big need of that out there, because I think when we were always working on our own rides, but there's a lot of, carnival operators that, want to drop off a ride, get it fixed. And, there's liability, there's expertise with hydraulics, electrical, welding. There's a lot of liability that goes into that stuff too. And yeah, you can get a local weld shop to do that kind of stuff, but we've really invested in a dedicated shop and a dedicated team to really, work on those rides. Now I would say we're not perfect with it. We're really trying hard to get better with it, because we'd always kind of done it, but now we're really just trying to, work on the scheduling, make sure because when you're dealing with 30, 40-year-old rides, you don't always know what you're getting into. So really make sure we're good at scheduling, good at troubleshooting, really working with our communication with the ride operators to get them turned around with a safe, reliable ride that in a fair value for getting it turned around too.
Yeah, you have quite the. I mean, when you bought Larson, you really took on quite the portfolio, and like you said, to be able to offer that to a park, such a big book of potential business is a pretty powerful. Your salesmen now have a, before, rather than just selling a coaster 7 years down the road or 5 years down the road, you got some, kind of things you can put up pretty quickly that are time proven and money proven and could do really well. So I always thought that was a pretty good move for you to purchase that.
Turned out to be great. Funny thing is, we never even had a salesman until last year in the whole company.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So people were just knocking on your door and buying it?
I think like Jeff Novotny, the former owner of Larson would, he'd go to IAPA, maybe Gibtown. He kind of quit going to Gibtown, and then maybe do a week or two on the road a year. And that was enough to kind of, keep them as busy as they wanted. And RMC just had people kind of knocking on our doors from, the quality of the coaster stuff. Now that kind of changed, after the pandemic, everything kind of went on hold. Just everything, and then when he came out of it, but anyhow, a year and a half ago, Jeff's son, Hunter Novotny, who leads up our business development team, he stayed with the company in the acquisition. He actually lives up here in Idaho now, works for me, and he's got a small team of business development people that are focused. And we worked and hired up some independent reps, that kind of stuff, and we never really did anything international. We're going to the IAPA, London, or the European show. Tomorrow I leave for, IAPA Asia. So we'll be going to that, going to the, Gibtown show again, going to the zoo show again.
Yeah. I heard you're going to come to Gibtown for the first time in a long time. That'll be pretty.
Yeah. We went last year, but I think we're going to keep going. We just,
you're kind of undercover last year. You you stopped by the booth and stuff, but you didn't really have a booth or.
Well, it's not the customer's job to come to us. We got to go to them, and we got to make sure we stay, keep a really great portfolio. I think we've always provided good service, but I think you've got to go out and earn everybody's trust in business, every day. And, we're trying to do that and, be a reliable partner out there that, people in the industry can count on.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think if you polled that side of the industry, the carnival industry, with what's going on with Tilt-A-Whirl or so, I think most people wouldn't really know, honestly, because it's been kind of quiet as far as the news goes. I talked to somebody the other day, actually, that was getting a ride refurbished. That was a Larson product of one kind or another, but he was the first one I heard about in a while. So, it's definitely starting to percolate a little bit out there that you're building or you're doing things and you're selling and you're.
Yeah, I don't want to say we're back, but because I don't think we really ever left, but we really didn't market ourselves, from that standpoint, or and I hate
the back burner.
Yeah, you don't want to be overly salesy, but I think we've got to be able to, we're taking rides to a spec ride to, hopefully it'll be done, and working on a new spec ride that will be taken to, hopefully it'll be sold when we get there. But the IAPA also, it's portable. We take that to Gibtown too for that standpoint. So, we realize that you really got to. Be front and center of mind with everybody. And, and I am super interested in, the feedback I get from how we can make rides better. And I'm also really interested in doing new rides, but new rides are a big, they're pretty pricey, from an investment standpoint, particularly to get into portables, because like, hey, it's like a transformer you got to build, drive down the road past DOT, and it's got to have a great ride motion that people like from that standpoint. So it's easy to put a lot of money into that stuff and not have a great ride motion. So I'm really interested in people's suggestions. If anybody comments on the podcast, or even some of the older rides are out there, great rides out there that maybe we could bring them back and modernize some of the stuff that's out there.
Yeah. But the spin rides, especially those were a great market, and those were selling pretty well. But again, it's a smaller purchase and all that. But people were constantly in the market for purchasing one of those, and you even see them in some small parks and things. That was a huge success.
I think we're very competitive on price. I think we've really worked hard on the mechanical stuff. The lights and paint look better than they ever have. And I think we've got, really probably the best lead times anybody out there. We could really turn these.
Do you really?
Around. Yeah. So we really can get after, because it goes. And then I think afterwards, if you need parts, you're not getting them from Europe. Like if we don't have it, we make just about everything. So we got a full machine shop in house. We will. If we don't have the part, we'll make it. Now, once in a while, we run into some long lead time items with a cylinder here or there, but we try to keep that stuff on stock so we can have everybody up and running. Turn it around very quickly.
So you can order a ride and get it how quickly? Like not too crazy.
Anywhere from, it depends what it is and exactly, but probably 3 to 4 months up to a year at the probably very most.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you hear that, everybody? They're going to be breaking down your door there, Darren, because it's crazy. Some of those Europeans, you're talking 2, 3, 4 years sometimes.
I would be. I mean, maybe we'll have that problem to get some. You can't do that with a coaster, but like that's really all the the smaller stuff that we do. But the longest thing we have is probably a year. We'd be looking at from that stuff, and that's probably going to be, maybe a drop tower. I think, because we kind of collaborate with another subcontractor on that.
Yeah, I get, like with the coasters, they're fascinating because what's the lead time for buying? Does it take a long time to get, foster that relationship, get the plans for what it's going to be at the park and move forward with it? Seems like it's a long process.
I wish it was quicker, but I think it's probably a year and a half, from the process, by some city starts thinking about it until they actually order it at the soonest, it might be 5 years from that standpoint. And then once they order it, we've done, pretty big size coasters in under a year and 10 months. We'd probably like to have 18 months for a big coaster. I think a lot of our competitors probably are, 2 or 3 years out, from that standpoint. But
especially if you do a coaster that's similar design or something to one that you've done before, as far as
if you ordered one that we've already done, we could probably, you're probably like what we just opened up with a couple, I would call them clones, but kind of our standard Raptor, which is our single rail ride. You probably got 3-4 months of installation and maybe 3 months to make it, from that standpoint. And then just depending on where it's going in the world, what the shipping time is, but usually that kind of overlaps. So you're probably, 7 months and something like that.
That's pretty quick. I actually thought it was going to be much longer, because sometimes the buying process with parks, it just seems to take forever. They're thinking about it, and then they think more about it, and then they're talking,
we manufacture stuff. So if our plasma table goes down or our CNC machine goes down, we have an immediate problem, and we either get it fixed or replace it, because it's a business imperative. I think when it comes to new rides, it's a, people, it's not an imperative, it's a big investment for people. So they kind of agonize it a lot. And, if they're going to make that investment, make this, how the summer go, when we're going to do it, we've got, in the portable stuff, you think you've got a lot more people accumulating cash at the end of the summer from that standpoint. So maybe they don't want to pay taxes. They want to buy stuff in the third, fourth quarter. We try to work with people, but it's a longer sales cycle than what I would have thought. I think on the portable side, I think people a little bit more spontaneous, when they've got the money, they're willing to make that investment.
Definitely.
I think you get into the park side of it, the bigger the park, more corporate they are, the more they become, kind of like financial spreadsheets and, MBAs, calculating now what the throughput is going to be, and a lot of, the total cost of ownership, those kind of factors, going into it, less about less about the actual ride itself and how great the ride is going to be. I think when you get into more some of the regional or the people that are owner operators of, the parks, I think they're a little bit more, because they've grown up on it, and a little bit more, trust their gut a little bit in terms of what, I want to get a great ride. This is what I want. And those go a little bit quicker, because they know what they're kind of looking for. And, they've grown up in the industry, typically family, been a part of the family for 30, 40 years. And, they just, they know what's good and out there and what's going to be
talk to their friends and knows what works and what does well and all that.
Yeah. First, let's get the MBAs in here, and we'll, voice of the customer. We'll put together little surveys and, how much adding up all those kind of things, and nothing wrong with it. But I think you can lie to yourself with the statistics, is it lies, damn lies, and statistics. Somebody once told me.
Yeah, no, that's a great saying. It's very true, because you get, it's just like we were just talking with a fair manager about I do a lot of marketing, and we use a lot of data, and the data can just overwhelm you. You could have bad conclusions, from data. You can say, well, I think these numbers are because of this, but they're not because of that, but because of something else. You can draw a bad conclusion or let the numbers get in your way, and then you have static models and dynamic models, and is that coaster going to increase overall attendance at my park because it's a new coaster and we're going to promote it? Or are you just looking at it costs $1 million and I need to have this many more people that come in order to pay for it, and whatever it is.
It is fascinating when you talk about what you're saying there, because I think you got some people that just trust, they got a vision or part of the plan, and the other people like, it's how much the attendance going to go up, how much can I increase ticket pricing, what's going to do to the what's the uptime, what's the operational expense. It just depends, how many the passengers per hour, like they value it a little bit different from that standpoint. And I think we can, we really try not to really have our team be like our hunters team, our business development team, not really be salespeople, really be ride consultants. What are you looking for? What problems are you trying to solve? Do you have you spend too much on operational expenses? Here's what we can do to help you reduce those from an existing wood coaster. You got a certain demographic you're trying to serve. Okay, this might be a good ride for you. You got a footprint issue. Here's what we could do for you here. You got something that got a new land you're building. Let's work with you on the theming to be able to do that stuff. We really try hard to, just really been. I think we've always put out good rides. We're just trying to be better and better with everything we're doing right now. So.
And how involved do you get with those parks? Like when you say they're building a new land, do you really get with them as far as the theming and the experience of the ride it's going to be now, or do you leave that?
We built our first dark ride about a year and a half ago at Fire in the Hole, down in scrape me right now. It's Hershey Park down there, but anyhow. That was very highly themed, and that particular ride, we really, the park really did, all the theming from that standpoint. Typically what we'll do is like, the park will have an artist or concept that they're working on, and they will give us a guidance, and we'll work with them on a graphics package, lighting, customized fiberglass, what they're looking for from that standpoint. I think a lot of times those things come through, they'll be working with a master planning firm that will be driving some of those decisions, what the overall, looks like, in conjunction with the park. And we basically follow their lead, and we'll go back to an iterative process of, you gave us, a concept, a vision, a storyboard, some, rendering that they'll give us, and we'll try to bring that into reality to, try to match what they're looking for. And oftentimes we'll do it, 2-3 times to be able to get something where everybody's really, because it's got to be functional too. It's got to be able to move and hold up, and you have the rigidity, the safety factors we're looking for, but also look great. And I think we're doing better and better with that stuff. And I am fascinated to see what happens like with 3D printing with that stuff going forward. I hope that we can move in that direction, but we'll kind of exploring those kind of concepts right now.
But now with your portfolio of rides, you're actually able to go in when it's a land, and you can a new land, offer them a coaster plus a major ride and maybe a couple kiddie rides, and theme the whole thing like there's some other companies that are kind of famous for doing that come in and they curate that whole area and do a pretty good job with it and get a bunch of sales.
Well,
And you certainly have that ability now with all the equipment that you have at your disposal.
That's the plan. Most of those things get driven through like the master planners, and we never had anybody working on kind of business development in the past. We didn't have anybody to engage with them, and now we've got a small team of people that's reaching out to those people because those decisions that they might they're working on 5 years out in the future typically, or something long-term plan of what they want to do because it's permitting and
or new parks.
Septic systems and queue lines and all the other rides they're going to put in there and what sequence they're going to do, all that kind of stuff. And we really never participated in that. So now we're really working on that stuff. And when you're trying to keep manufacturing, because we've got high overhead to be able to support our welders and machinists and assembly people. We really got to keep consistent work, and the further out we work in the future, the easier it is for us to plan to be able to do that stuff. So I really feel like we're doing the right stuff. It just I think we're building lots of momentum, and I think if you look back 5 years from now, I think we're going to be I think we put the foundation in place to really be great, and I expect really to be at a pretty good growth curve over the next few years.
Yeah,
keep my fingers crossed.
There's lots of possibilities, and new parks too. Like that are building from the ground up. They a lot of guys come in and they give them guidance and they sell them a bunch of rides when for their first iteration when they open up. So you see a lot of the same manufacturers, which is be a good thing for you to be able to.
Yeah, we weren't right that. We never really pursued that. We kind of we just, we didn't have the salespeople. We'd wait for people to come to us. We'd go to IAPA once a year. And it was enough to keep everybody busy. But, I want to be, that's fine. But I mean, I think, I think for us to really thrive long-term, we've really got to be, international to be able to do that. Just I think that's what the people we're competing against. Really love to be able to export from the United States as much as possible. I grew up in Flint, Michigan, where General Motors was founded, heavy manufacturing. My whole family was involved in that. So it's really kind of been, I watch what happens when you're not competitive doing that stuff and communities crumble from that standpoint. And I love the fact that we're providing all these great jobs for everybody on our team that, I think they're, welders and, they're putting kids, put food on the table, paying rent, houses, all that kind of stuff. And it feels good for me to be able to do that in the United States. And I think for us to do that, we just got to, we've got to really be, put out a world-class product and be competitive, great rides, great cost position, great quality, great service. And I think we're getting there. You never really get there, but, we're making progress every day to be better than we were yesterday.
Progress every day. Well, your first sort of innovation, what was it called? Like the iBox, what kind of the track type?
That's
was kind of revolutionary, right? When you did it.
Yeah, that's where I mentioned before. We'll take we really start off with a flat, 40 by 8 foot set of, plate steel, and we'll cut it on our plasma tables. And then we'll set it up on special stands and flex it in, and then we build it up from the ground up. And then really a patented, splice process to be able to get the tracks to made up. We've really become wonderful at doing that process, because we really got it dialed in over the years, the quality, the productivity, really making sure that we're within, these 36-foot pieces of track, and we'll get them within a 32nd of where we want them to be. And that's like, if you think about at least twist the track up in the air, like there's X, Y, Z coordinates for, where we want this piece of track to be in this end, so it mates up with the other one. And we might be doing a mile of track, so, we've really got it dead nuts on before we ship it. But, the weird thing about it is depending on we do it climate controlled in our shop, which is around 65 degrees usually. But when you put it out it might put it out in a 90-degree heat, and that's, the steel expands and it might grow by 2 or 3 feet, so it's kind of it's interesting process.
There's a lot of science goes into it. No question about it.
But we hope so.
A lot of science goes into it. So what's been your favorite project that you've worked on since you've been there?
I think they're like children. Every one you're working on is, your favorite. It's always your next project you're working on.
That's what's your favorite child? I was going to say that, yeah.
It's maybe the most challenging one was the first big reprofile I worked on at Hershey Park, just because it was my first reprofile, which is reimagine where it was existing wood structure when we put all new foundations in, and you learn. I think it turned out to be a great ride. I think it's been really well received. It's one of the the best rides in the world. I think you look at it, I think it's maybe ranked in the top 14, something like that for roller coasters. But it's a very intense process because we weren't great with scheduling at the time, so I feel like we got much better with that. So we'd work really, really hard and get towards the end and like, oh my gosh, we're not going to make it. We just got to throw a bunch of extra labor at this to be able to get there and work, 100 hours, to be able to get there. And what I like to say is like, I really appreciate that our team's willing to put on their capes and really go out and be heroes, but I don't want that to be the norm. I want that to be the exception. When we need to, we'll do it. But that's just, and I think subsequent to that, we've made sure when we do a big project, we've got, everything's designed in the order we want to install it. We make sure we got all the product on site before we get there. We've got things organized on site, and we've got a pretty good handle on how many hours it takes for, the tasks that we're doing right now to be able to plan it out. So we get the right amount of people on site. And it sounds kind of like no-brainer stuff, but when you're doing custom stuff, it's they've never, every project's different. You've got to find a way to be able to, if you're building the same ride every time, it's kind of easy to get it dialed in. If you're building a different ride that's similar, there's a lot of challenges. And we really just had, hey, we're just going to work harder kind of culture, which God, it's a long ways, but it's hard on people, and customers want to be able to have confidence that you're hitting milestones and you're going to hit their open date, so they feel good about things. And we've always done with the smaller stuff, it's a little bit more contained, the bill of materials, like the rides that we build out in Texas, because they're not really custom, when they might get customized, but it's not.
Right. Custom is the key word, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you have actually, who said that once years ago, because they, in the carnival market, they complain, or some people complain, that there's not as much equipment at Gibtown, like on display, as there used to be. And I talked to the lady who used to own Selner one year, and I was like, why don't you bring a ride like you used to or whatever else? And she said, well, when I built a red tilt-a-whirl, that's all I built. Yeah, I'd build one on spec and somebody would come and buy it here. But now when they want a purple bonnet and a, blue center and this lighting package and that thing and something else, I get stuck with it, and I want to get stuck with it. So, and I thought about that because custom, like when you're describing the coaster, I was thinking about like, how the heck do you price something like that out? Like you have to go through like a builder would, I guess, and just figure out all the labor costs and then you have changes, right? They make changes. You got to figure out how you're going to charge them for that, or how that factors in. Is that a big process?
Oh my gosh, you're good at the lady that does that is Amy Garcia. Her dad actually founded the company. She's been with us for a long time, but we've it's really hard to do custom coasters. If you build it already, it's easy. You know what the cost was, labor hours, but the first time you're doing it, it is a little bit of a black art to be able to do that. We do it all the time, and we're never going to get it exact, but if we can be within plus or minus 5% of what we think our costs will be when we bid it, I think we've done phenomenal at that. To be able to get in there, but because it changes on, we don't. What's the hotels if we're going to be there for months? What are hotel rates going to be? Since I've been here in the last 5 years, steel's gone from 40 cents to $1.20. So that's a huge swing of what's going on. That's really, that's not just steel for the track, but it gets into all the hardware where might triple. And there's lots and lots of hardware when you get into this stuff. So it's like
electronics were crazy too for a while.
Yeah, like, is it going to be? Are they going to do wood? Are they going to do steel lattice? Are they going to do pipe columns? All of those kind of things. And interestingly, as you go up vertically, the price isn't just a linear thing as it goes up, because it gets much harder as you go harder. Higher you go, harder to work up there. Bigger cranes, wider bends that it takes to be able to support that stuff. So it's an art to be able to quote that stuff well. And, to be frankly, in the first couple of projects we did, that I was involved with, they're kind of break-even projects for us, because we just, we weren't as organized as we need to be. And we just, really didn't, post coming out of COVID, so we were pretty aggressive on stuff. And I was happy to have the work from that standpoint, but, they were not, it was kind of good learning experiences for me and the company. It kind of kept everybody busy, but not exactly big. We have to make good, decent money to be able to invest in the next ride, do an R&D to keep everybody going, and we've got pretty big high overhead with. We've got 80,000 manufacturing here, another 60,000 down in Texas. So we've got a lot of space and people to be able to support from that standpoint. So they like us to be profitable.
Yeah. Hey, you're talking about the steel prices, like post-COVID. I mean, I thought you guys should have had a stock market board behind your head, but like the price right now is this, and then 5 minutes later it'd be that. It was crazy how often they were changing and how much they were changing in a short period of time.
Interesting. There's not any good way. The smaller rides, it's not that dramatic. On the bigger stuff, we can really have huge swings of a couple $1 million on a project, depending on what's going on with it. And there's not a good way to really hedge those kind of those purchases either that I found that makes economic sense. So we try to lock in when we sign a deal. One of the first things we do is go out and buy steel so we can take that variable off.
Right.
We're not trying to make it on whatever's going to happen or make money on the trade of it. So we want to be able to, if it's 85 cents a pound, we buy it. We want to get the purchase order placed right away. So we know that's locked into place and just kind of takes that off the table. Unfortunately, it means we got more money tied up in steel than we want. It's sitting, big stacks of steel waiting to get used, but it doesn't go bad. And, I think that's been the, kind of the conservative approach that we take.
You can use it for something else instead.
Sometimes.
Build a nice new building or something out there.
Yeah.
That's pretty exciting. So that must have been quite the experience when you did your first coaster pricing to figure out what it costs and make sure you're not going on. It would worry the heck out of me that you make a couple mistakes, you could be behind, right? And get yourself in trouble.
You can be well, and we did do that too in the very first one too. But that's okay. Like we learn from every time, and I think we've really got a good methodology right now. And we've got a great new finance person that joined our team about 6 months ago. It's really helping us. It's a weird thing in being a manufacturer. Like, how much does it cost to make something? Well, it's not that easy. You got the material, bringing it in. If you got to machine it, you got to send it out for treatment. All these, what they call is landed costs. You've got to be able to add up all those for what's it really cost you to make this coffee mug. If you're only making one coffee mug, it's easy. But if you're making 10,000 parts, you've really got to, it takes some pretty decent accounting to be able. And like, I'm not complaining, but we're, really coming from an immature infrastructure standpoint. We're really putting some great systems in place to be able to keep track of all that stuff.
Yeah. What are you delivering this year? What's coming up in the next that you could tell us about?
Well, we just opened up this dueling Raptor coaster in Wallaby, Holland, which was one of the first. And there was it's our single rail Raptor coaster, which is, one size chill and one size extreme. So you kind of get a Top Gun stall. We just opened that up in May. That turned out fantastic. A project that got put on delay because of COVID. So we're happy with that.
There's like two different experiences, a slower one and a faster one and a.
Yeah, one doesn't go upside down. The other one's, pretty extreme going upside down, and they race. So they're always pulling ahead of each other. One will be upside down right over the top of the other one. Really, really fun. Came out great. Colors look good. Theming looks good. They do a wonderful job of really putting things together over there. And then we're about to open one up here in Iowa, Waterloo, Iowa. A new ride's going to open up there, and that's going to be
Waterloo.
Call our standard Raptor. Yeah, Lost Island is the name of the park.
Did you get your canvas from Waterloo Tent and Tarp?
No, we did not.
There's a famous canvas company from Waterloo. So that one's opening pretty soon. How big a coaster is that one?
It's about 100 feet tall, and I think it's around 1,800 feet, something like that. It's similar to what we built it in. We opened up in Korea last year. Similar layout. And then we've got so much stuff on the pipeline right now coming down. But like, they wouldn't allow me to. The parks like to make all the announcements.
I hate the park side with the news because they never talk about it. But yet it's all over the place. Some kids on the internet with telling you everything about it, but you can't tell it officially what's going on, which is weird to me because why wouldn't you just talk about it? Because you're building hype about it. Have you what is I've seen numbers and statistics, and it's probably really good for you, but when they introduce a new coaster, an impact coaster like you're talking about, what is the impact on the park, in attendance? I mean, what do you?
I think it depends on the park, and they're not great at being able to it's hard to tell if you're a Universal when you put a new ride in, like how many more people show up there. I mean, I think they can statistically get that a little bit, but I've seen things up to, if it's a regional park and you put a big ride in, you might see up to a 30% bump in attendance, and
You said 30%?
yeah, up to 30%, because, if they haven't put a big, because like everybody, if it's not a destination park, people in the local area have been there, kids and that stuff. You have to give people a reason to come back. And, the smaller rides, people like, and they keep everybody busy, not waiting in lines. But they really need some of the bigger rides to be able to put it out there because, you want to run billboards and commercials and sell season tickets and those kind of things. And it even gives them a little bit of pricing power from that standpoint when they make those big investments. In my opinion, coming out of COVID, everybody was shut down. Then everybody opened back up and everybody was unbelievably busy. And, so there's no reason to invest in new rides.
Right.
And so you had this not busy, at capacity. Why spend a bunch of money on CapEx stuff? Now you're going back to normal where, and they took all the CapEx stuff out of their budgets. Now I think it's going back to normal where people like, hey, if you want to grow your business, and the people that I've seen that have invested in new rides, have saw significant upticks, in their market because you're giving people a reason to come back. It's a competitive market out there for the entertainment dollars. And I think I love the amusement industry. Who doesn't like, we always say we're selling smiles, and I think we really are. But, I think if you're running the park business or, you've got to give a reason that people come back and spend their 30, 40, 50, 70, $100, whatever it's going to be you're charging for admission.
Or multiple times per season too, which is a big thing with them now, is like they're trying to really churn the people through, especially with the regional parks, as many times as possible. They have all these incentives and all these cool things for coming back and freebies.
When you talk to the parks, they're focused on how much the spend is once you're in the park too, on food and drinks and all the other things that come along with it for getting people in there. So there's a lot of positives that kind of happen with it. So I think we're happy to build great rides and get people, big stuff to bring it in there. And we're also happy to build, just wonderful rides depending on, the functional, where it fits in the park and what their theming is and footprint. And, I think I'm excited because we've got, this great portfolio to be able to help people depending on whatever they need. I think we've got a solution for them. And we're really happy to work with the parks and portable people, carnivals, to tell us what you need. What do you need? If you got an idea for theme or a different ride, I'm happy to get a good idea from anywhere, from that standpoint.
We'll build it.
So
I guess the difference was on the portable side and the carnival side, when they made money in 2021 and things blew up, they spent right away. They bought new rides by and large. I mean, it was incredible the amount of equipment that was bought in the last couple of years as the economy went up, or as business went up. They just really purchased a bunch of stuff, and now you get that glut like I was talking about with these lead times that are just crazy. So it might be a great time for you to be kind of re-entering the portable business, because I don't think you can find a manufacturer that could deliver you something in under a year for a major ride. I mean, it's just about impossible. So I think if that word was out there, you could. What are the portable Larson rides that you're building or able to build?
Well, we've got the rings, loops, several different sizes of loops that we build.
Loops, right?
A drop tower. We've got the tilt-a-whirl spin rides, and then we've got flying rides. We've also got in there, from that standpoint.
The flying coaster, you said.
Yeah, and we've also our flying scooter, which I think we may be rebranding. That's so exciting from that standpoint right now. Our flying scooter, which is really, in my opinion, one of the best rides that we build. We've made a new base for it, so it's easy to set up. We've also got it set up to where it telescopes right now, so it goes up in the air from that standpoint to add some more verticality to it. So we only had, I think, one engineer, really down in Texas for the Larson portfolio, which really all you could really do is kind of maintain from that standpoint. Now, because of what we've done with RMC, I think we've got 14, 15 total engineers on staff right now. So we're really able to be much more innovative and creative and modernize and really push things. The trick is you got to pick what you want to work on. We've been really working hard the last couple of years to come out with a new family coaster, which is less extreme. We won awarded for Brass Awards. We're building our first one we're going to deliver our first one commercially 2027, but we're in the process of, putting one in out in the yard right now just to prove out not worry about the track, just, kind of going through the train clearances. You draw it up on a, SolidWorks computer and it looks great, but we're doing from
How
real
big is
world
it?
testing.
How big of a family coaster is it?
Well, this is just a sample. We're just building the lift hill and the brake mechanical section to be able to do it out here in the in our yard from that standpoint.
No, I mean
So
the one you're going to deliver. What's the plans for the family coaster? How big?
It's that is going to be I can't get too much into design. It's a short one from that standpoint, but it's a custom design for the person. I think it's going to be around 1,200 feet. So it's not a massive coaster,
Pretty good size.
but I think we've got. What's cool about our family coaster, our track, we can do some things unique about it, because we flex in the shape, but the undulation between up and down. So you kind of picture being in a wheelbarrow back and forth like little kids, jostling them around. So, the turns will all be, if you think about a wild mouse where they really have sharp turns, we're going to be able to do really those sharp turns. We'll be able to overbank them. We'll be able to get the track off axis from that standpoint. We can do a chain. We can do a booster launch. We can do an LSM launch with it. And we've got some standard layouts of whether you want to do it on, pipe column or wood or steel lattice, but really, and it's a really fun, open, car that we've got, created a brand new car from ground up from that standpoint. So it should be great again. And that's part of that goes just back into the, being able to serve the whole market. We've really done great with the extreme custom stuff. How do we get into, but there's a bunch of parks that have that demographic that we need to be able to serve with it. And it's a little bit lower price point. But it's, it's bringing takes the, the riders down to, like probably 3-year-olds is kind of what you're looking at there.
Really? That's really short. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well,
36. Yeah. That's always a conundrum for these parents is like, you got to be 36 or 42 or 48 or whatever it might be to ride. So there's so many kids that are unridden or whatever you want to call them. They're not tall enough.
It's a challenge. But some of the ones, these are like the family coasters designed to not be that scary and extreme. People always want to put younger kids on bigger coasters, but a lot of times what we find is emotionally they're just not geared up for it. We don't want it to be the most terrifying experience of somebody's life because they, their parent, because they could fit on it from that standpoint. So because you get into when you get into 36-inch kids, you're dealing with 2.5 years old sometimes. So yeah, maybe you could get them in there, but should you? And we really
psychologically, can they take it? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's probably fine for a family ride where you're up and down, they're having a little bit of fun, but when you're going up a 200-foot lift hill, that's a lot for somebody to take in.
That's a pretty serious lift. What about you? You don't have any designs to make portable coasters, do you?
We've talked about it a lot. I think there's a little bit of a market. There's more of a market in Europe for that than there is here, in the U.S. for traveling fairs. Because I think they set up for, a month long with some of the things. So they've got a little bit different, they just do business a little bit different, I think. I've not found a good way to economically, I think the people build a couple of portable coasters in the past. And I think a couple of manufacturers have gone out of business that have done that because I think it's,
I think about like the Wacky Worm for Fujimi made, and they sold a ton of those, but they were priced pretty inexpensively. I mean, it was not
it's like right around $1 million.
Really affordable, approachable item, when they built them. So they sold a ton of them. But, is there something available in that market? Probably, something bigger than a Dragon Wagon, but smaller than a
maybe. It's just there's our track's pretty robust, and that's really been our secret sauce from that standpoint. So our track is fairly heavy duty, and not super. I think we could get there with it, but I think we'd have to really redesign the whole thing to have something that's going to be cost competitive and mobile to do, to be in that, like you're talking about the Wacky Worm kind of stuff, to be able to compete with it. We can certainly do it, but I think we've got other things that are probably fit our core competencies better than just trying to slide something in there. Although we kick it around a lot, and like I'm not against it. We're about ready to. We've done a bunch of big modernization things in our existing ride portfolio, and those efforts are really starting to. We've had Larson for about 2 years right now, so those things are really starting to work their way through the system. So now I think we're just about done with our new family coaster. So we've got some engineering capacity to say, what do we want to do next? So which is kind of a fun spot to be in of like, what do we want to build and what do we want to dream up? And by the way, it's got to be great, but it's also got to work.
Yeah, well, that's the difficulty, I guess, is you have to figure out, do you modify an existing ride you have and then try and sell that, which is lower cost, or do you take a chance and engineer something with financial risk, but it might have a higher return as far as sales go? So it's you got to constantly be trying to figure out what the best way to go is, I guess.
The portable is hard because, again, it's a transformer. It's got to do those other things of driving down, and then you use something brand new. If it's not a good ride motion, you're liable to make people sick, and it's probably going to cost you $2 million to find that out. So it's from that standpoint, it's a lot easier to build upon an existing platform and modify it, or even look at, I'm really kind of looking at some of the vintage rides that might be out there that maybe somebody had a great ride, but they went out of business, a long time ago. And so maybe we can look at some of that stuff and maybe bring it into the, 2026 or something like that with, a new twist or whatever. And we don't have anything there specifically lined up with that, but like just in analyzing, what's the best way to attack this stuff. I'd love to do, everybody wants to just do brand new stuff, but like, if you look at the brand new stuff, I don't know what the success rate is, but it's not high.
No, it's not high. There's plenty of rides that have failed, no question.
Yeah,
plenty of rides that have failed that had a big development budget behind them too, I'm sure.
Yeah, like and I don't. If you've got some good ideas, or you're any of your
rides that go around and rides that go up and down are my two ideas.
All right, we'll put you on the design team.
I mean, I think for you, if you could develop something that would be good for both the portable and the park market together, that's pretty easy to go back and forth between. That's the golden ring there. That's the way to get it, because there's been some rides that Tilt-A-Whirl's a good example, have done well, or a Wisdom Tornado or something like that, where they do well in both markets and not that hard to make portable or make permanent. So if you could do that, then really you can cross over both markets and win. But I think you have a lot of great things going on with your portfolio you have now and what you're able to offer these parks. So that should be very exciting for you if you can get everything together and offer them a nice program as far as what you have.
Yeah, we're trying hard with it. I think it's been pretty well received from the parks, and we're not perfect, but I think if we do make a mistake, we really try to respond to it pretty quick. We'll put people on planes, get them out there. If we have, I've heard nothing but horror stories, people trying to get parts from Italian rides and some of the European rides, from a service standpoint. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but we're pretty good with that stuff. We keep a big warehouse full of inventory and able to ship stuff overnight. And if we don't have it, we'll make it. The only thing that really stops us is like when we can't. Sometimes there's some buyout stuff that we don't have. We try to keep it in there, but we really try to take care of people. And I am super interested in doing some new rides. It's just, I think we've got our current portfolio where we want it to be, where it's really, looking great. And now we're really trying to figure out what's next once we figure out our family coaster. And it's probably going to be something hopefully exciting in the, the portable, flat ride space.
Yeah, that's going to be exciting. It should be an exciting year for you guys. We'll be watching you closely, seeing what you're doing. Looking forward to your return to Gibtown. If you're going to be displaying or doing something there, it'd be pretty neat.
Yeah, we're working on I'm not sure we're going to get it done, but a new spec model for a flying ride, or, maybe we'll have it sold before we get there, but a new, very cool concept the guys are working on right now. I green-lighted them last week to get it built. Hopefully we'll have something to show. Yeah,
and let us know. We'll definitely put it out there on the Amusement Warehouse side, Carnival Warehouse side, and let people know you're doing it. Because I think a lot of people don't really know what's going on. I think this is great that you explain your vision for what's going on and where you're going to be in the future.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to meet with you and your audience. We appreciate it. Appreciate any love everybody has for us. But we're really trying hard to be. Really our vision is to be the best ride manufacturer in the world. And I say to our team all the time, why not us? Why can't we do it here in the United States? Why can't we put out the best rides? But nobody's going to give you that. You got to go out and, earn the championship and,
earn it, right?
And do it every year and every day with what we do. So I sincerely appreciate the people that have purchased our rides in the past and the people that we're working with on supporting their existing rides and, look forward to really providing great rides to, future customers too. But thank you so much for your.
That's awesome. Thank you. And best of luck to you this year. And if you have exciting news, please share it and we'll put it out there for you.
All right. Well, thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks very much, Darren. This podcast is brought to you by Innovative Ticketing is the ticketing source made for the amusement industry. Our staff of professionals can guide you through your setup, assist with customer service, even on the weekends when you most need it, and help increase your sales through promotions that work. Innovative Ticketing is the ticketing source made for the amusement industry. Sign up today at innovativeticketing.com.